John chapter 20, verse 1 to 10. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him." So Peter and the other disciple started for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. Then Simon Peter, who was behind him, arrived and went into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the burial cloth that had been around Jesus' head. The cloth was folded up by itself, separate from the linen. Finally, the other disciple, who had reached the tomb first, also went inside. He saw and believed. They still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. Then the disciples went back to their homes.
Thank you, Charlie, very much for that. Well, it was one of those holidays where we went for the house swap option. I don't know if you've ever done one of those. We were swapping with friends who live in Monmouth, and so it wasn't far to go. But on the way over, I think we stopped in the Forest of Dean. We got a phone call. I got a phone call from Chris, who we were swapping houses with. And he said, "Oh, we've just turned up, Jim, at your house, and the front door was wide open." We have sort of, we're a bit thrown by that, I have to admit, but we went on in, and it looks like everything is in order. Like no, there's been no burglary or anything like that. And I went, "Oh, that's okay," because I'm sure I just forgot to lock the front door. I just left it wide open because maybe packing a car. You know how it is when you're packing the car, you're trying to load bikes on. You've got the family, everyone's all going. Locking the front door. That's something you just. It's non-essential, right? So, well, anyway, that sense of surprise at arriving at a house you expect to be locked up with the door wide open is in some ways, in a small way, what Mary must have felt on that first Easter Sunday when she turned up at the grave of her master. And she'd seen where he'd been laid the Friday before, and the grave, we know, was evidently a cave of some kind, and a stone had been rolled in front of it. And she gets there, and the front door to the cave is wide open. What's going on there? And so she's thinking, maybe are the grave robbers? Have they been, or maybe the Jewish authorities, have they stolen the body away? And understandably, Mary is pretty afraid by this. She's shaken, and so she do what maybe any of us might do. She runs off and goes and finds two other guys, two of Jesus' closest friends, John and Simon Peter, and tells them what's happened. Well, they don't hang around. They're immediately on their feet. They're running to the grave to go and see it for themselves. And we're told that John is faster than Peter and that he gets there first. And why does John mention that? That's a rather trivial detail. That's a bit competitive, isn't it, to mention this in the Bible, to say, look, I was a faster runner than Simon Peter. Why bother mentioning that here? The answer is because that's what happened. This is what we're reading this morning, is sort of expert witness testimony of what really happened on that day. And John wants to give us the details exactly as he remembers them. So John arrives first, but like Mary, he's a bit fearful. He kind of looks in, but he doesn't actually go on in. And only later does he go in. First, Simon Peter gets there. Well, when Simon Peter gets in, he goes on in, he climbs in, and what's the thing that was recorded for us? What's the main thing that's mentioned? Well, it is it's the discarded strips of linen that have been wrapped around Jesus's body, laid to one side, And we're told in verse 5, what is that? Verse 5, let's have a look down quickly. We're told about it in verse 5, the strips of linen were lying there. Again, verse 6, the strips of linen were there, as well as the cloth which had been wrapped around Jesus' head. Evidently, you wrapped up someone and you put a special cloth on the face, and that was folded up to one side. That's a bit hard to picture, isn't it? Particularly younger guys. That's a bit hard. I think we could do with a visual aid, don't you think? I think Daniel and Rachel might be able to help us. Could you help us with what's exactly going on here? This kind of how you wrap up someone. Here's your bits. I keep 2 meters away, just there. So Dan, we're going to use loo roll instead. I hope that's okay. So Dan, come and stand over here. You might even want to stand. Does anyone see? Okay, right. Off you go. Let's wrap up Daniel as fast as you can in loo roll. Let's see how long that's going to take. It's luxury loo roll, so it should be. Maybe it's from Aldi. It's not really producing the goods. Oh no, it keeps breaking. We didn't. Okay, Dan's going to help. That's good. That's good. Oh no. Is the other one any better? We've got 2. I won't touch it. I'll just kick it over to you. This is fine. This is kind of. Oh. Okay, we're getting there. Oh, okay. I think we can scratch this illustration. It hasn't worked, has it? Dan, can we have you lying here? Okay, on this kind of, and can we give him a face cloth? Okay, right. Okay, we need to imagine. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you so much. Can we imagine this man is wrapped up in loo roll from top to bottom? Children, why don't you practice this at home? I think that's what we need. Okay, so we got the semblance of some burial cloths. Okay, thank you, Rachel. You've done a great job wrapping him up. Okay, so here he is. It's very sad. We have our Daniel. Daniel is our dead man. I'm going to say to Daniel, would you defeat death for us? Would you rise again? Great stuff. Okay, look at him. What is he doing? Oh, okay, he's gathering up the loo roll. Okay, he's putting it down there nicely. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. Face cloth. What's happening? Oh, it's being folded up. Right. Okay, and that's very tidy of you. Thank you. I think that will do nicely. Thank you. We don't do round of applause normally, but I think we need a little bit of a round of applause. Thank you, Daniel and Rachel. Well, there we have it. Now. What we were trying to illustrate with this little fun thing we did here was to show, that Daniel no longer has any need now of this burial clothes or of the face cloth the moment he rises again. He doesn't need it anymore. He can leave it to one side. And in just the same way, Jesus Christ, when he rose from the dead, he no longer needed any burial cloths anymore, and he could take the face covering off, fold it up, leave it to one side. That's fine, because Jesus is not a body that has been stolen away. This is a body that has been raised. This is a body that has risen again. If he was the victim of grave robbers, they wouldn't have bothered doing all that. They wouldn't have taken all the stripped him off. No, this is a man who's come to life and just dispenses with his kit. It's a bit like, if you're a child, I bet you never do this, but maybe, there's a danger sometimes if you're a child. You've got your backpack, you've been at school, and you get home, and off comes the backpack on the floor, lunchbox gets discarded, coat comes off, and it's all strewn across the hall. I bet that never happens. But, it could happen. It's like you have no longer any need for these bits and bobs. You're now at home. Jesus no longer has any need, as from Easter Sunday, for the burial clothes. He's risen again. Well, John took all this in. He saw, we're told he saw and he believed. He saw, verse 8, and he believed. The facts lead to faith. He couldn't deny what he'd seen with his eyes. Did you just see, as some of you adults, you see a couple of days ago that the TV presenter and public scientist, Professor Alice Roberts. She tweeted, just a little reminder today, dead people don't come back to life. Well, that is true for most of the time, but on this Easter Sunday, the evidence points in the other direction. It wasn't unscientific of John to believe that Jesus had risen from the dead. He wasn't making up what he expected to happen. In fact, we can tell he wasn't expecting to see that. No, he in fact was being highly scientific. He was responding to what he had seen with his eyes. The Christian faith is built on facts. We say Jesus is Lord, not because we wish it was true. We say Jesus is Lord because the tomb was gloriously empty. Not even death could crush this King of love.
So the second reading is from John chapter 20, verses 11 to 18. Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white, seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They have taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they have put him." At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, please tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned towards him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her.
Thank you, Ruth. Well, John now focuses his camera on Mary. And Mary is left at the graveside. She's in tears. She's standing there. And she, like John earlier, bends over to look into the tomb. But what does she see this time? Well, she sees two angels in white where Jesus' body had been. And they ask her, "Woman, why are you crying?" Well, her response is so personal, isn't it? So personal. They've taken my Lord away, and I don't know where they have put him. And just then, she becomes aware of someone behind her. Maybe the angels point, but she sort of looks, and she doesn't really see who it is, because we're told it was Jesus right there. And she says, and Jesus says to her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" That's a funny question, isn't it, to ask at a graveside? Who are you looking for? You might say, who have you come to remember? You don't stand in a mortuary and say, "Who are you looking for?" No, it's suggestive, though, Jesus is saying, "Who are you looking for?" And Mary thinks, well, it's the gardener. And so she says, "Sir, if you carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." You know, Mary's desperate to get the body back in its right place. Jesus says to her, "Mary." And that's enough. Suddenly she recognizes who this man is. And how? Well, it's how every other Christian down the centuries have recognized him, by hearing him, by his voice. She turns to him and cries out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," a name she'd used so many times before. Here she is reunited with her teacher, her master. It's a very touching moment, but more than touching, it's so significant, far exceeding all other world firsts, like the first person to scale Everest or land on the moon or discover a vaccine for coronavirus. This moment is chief of all moments, when Mary, a human being, lays eyes on the man who has defeated death. When we know from that moment on that death is not the end of the story. We needn't fear it anymore. A vaccine better than the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine is being discovered. Hope in the face of death. And who is it who gets the first glimpse of it? It's a woman. It's a woman. And the thing is, in the first century, you would never make up the fact that a woman was the first eyewitness. I'm not defending it. It's not right. It's so wrong. But in those days, only the witness of men was what held up in a court. So women's evidence wasn't respected. And it's shocking to our ears, but that was the case. It's a bit like maybe in our day, making the first witness of the resurrection sort of maybe a 5-year-old child. And those of us who have 5-year-old siblings know that sometimes they can't be totally straight with the facts. Sometimes it just wouldn't build your whole Christian faith upon the testimony of a 5-year-old. And that's how, this is what happened. It was Mary who saw Jesus first. And in so doing, in recording the fact that she did, here we have Christianity dignifying the place of women, upholding the voice of women, saying, look who the first eyewitness is. Mary. And Jesus says to her, she's undoubtedly clinging to him, she says, do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. And here comes the really important message of the whole day. In a sense, this is really important. We move from the facts of the resurrection to the Father, who holds wide his arms to us, to any who would come to him. He says, look, now that I've risen, go and tell them what? Don't tell them about me. No, tell them about the Father. I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Now that is a huge thing to say. In John's Gospel, God is often spoken of as the Father, or Jesus calls him as my Father, never your Father. I think the one way we could kind of get the idea of it is, let's imagine Jonathan today had come to us in his Lamborghini. We know that Jonathan is lucky enough to occasionally drive a Lamborghini, and it's not his own. And imagine if he said after church, hey, look, do you want to go for a spin in the Lamborghini? Okay, and we go, yes. And so as we're walking across the car park, we see it over there. He says, great. I'm going now to my Lamborghini and your Lamborghini. My set of wheels and your set of wheels. We'd be going, what? That would be a huge thing. We'd be blown away. Well, that's exactly what Jesus is saying. I'm going to my Father and your Father. My God and your God. Children, I want you to imagine someone maybe at school who very sadly maybe doesn't have a mummy or a daddy. Okay, they're an orphan. They don't have a mummy and a daddy. And they've got a really good friend who they just love to spend time with, who has a lovely home and the most loving family. And it's just amazing to be there with them. And one day your friend says, look, let's go to my place, to my home. And do you know what? My home, and it can be your home. He's not just my daddy, but he can be your daddy too. That is the message of the resurrection, that the paperwork has come through. What Jesus has done worked on the cross. He died in our place. He was cut off so that we could be welcomed in. He was shunned by the Father, that we could be accepted by the Father. And the resurrection is the sign that it's all go. It's all happened. This is the message of Easter Sunday. It's an adoption day. Not just that we have a risen Lord, but that we have a new Father. And we can live our life now in this world under God, knowing that he's our dad.